Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjaviare Radha Madhava Kunjaviare Radha Madhava Kunjaviare Gopijana Vallabha Girvaradhare Pijana Vallabha Girvaradhare Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunira Vancha Yamuna Tira Vancha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjavena Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjavena Pijana Vallabha Givaradhare Pijana Vallabha Givaradhare Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjan Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjan Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamun Tiravanashavali Yamuna Tira Vanachavali Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Hare Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Shri Radhe Ram Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, and welcome to this 23rd day of 2025 on this cold morning here at Nagari. And we'll be reading from the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Prescribed Duties for Mankind, chapter 10. Let's see. The battle between the demigods and Vritrasura. We'll be reading from text 12. Narayanang namaskritya chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim yasam tato jayamudire naktaprayashva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata seva bhavatu tamashloke bhakti bhavati naishtiki yatakshashu mano buddhis tattvatrikvashtapandanaha astita param yogam nadehang bubude gatam yataka yatakshashu mano buddhis tattvatrikvashtapandanaha astita param yogam nadehang bubude gatam. Would anyone online like to try to read the verse?
I would like to.
Try.
Itakshasu mano buddhis tattva dvashtapandanaha astita paramam yogam nadeham subudhe katam.
Thank you, Prabhu. Anyone else online? Yata controls. Aksha senses. Asu the life air. Manaha the mind. Buddhihi intelligence. Tattvadrik one who knows the tattvas, the material and spiritual energies. Dvashtabandhanaha liberated from bondage. Astitaha being situated in. Paramam the supreme. Yogam absorption. Science. Na not. Deham the material body. Ubudhe perceived. Gatam left. Translation. The Dichi Muni controlled his senses, life force, mind, and intelligence, and became absorbed in trance. Thus, he cut all his material bonds. He could not perceive how this material body became separated from himself. Purport. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, text 5, Anta kale chamam evam smaran mukta kalevaram ya prayati samadbhavam yad nastyatra sangshayaha. Whoever at the time of death quits his body remembering me alone at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. Of course, one must practice before one is overcome by death. The perfect yogi, namely the devotee, lies in trance, thinking of Krishna. He does not feel his material body being separated from his soul. The soul is immediately transferred to the spiritual world. Yaktva deham punarjanma naiti mameti. The soul does not enter the womb of a material mother again. It is transferred back home, back to Godhead. This yoga, bhakti yoga, is the highest yoga system, as explained by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita 6:47. Yoginam api sarvesham madkare te nantaratmana charavan bhajate yomam same yuktat tamo mataha. Of all yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshipping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga, and is the highest of all. The bhakti yogi always thinks of Krishna, and therefore, at the time of death, he can very easily transfer himself to Krishna Loka without even perceiving the pains of death. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shlakaya Chakshur Unmilatangena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shumate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Teshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Yataksha Sumanubudhis Tattva Drigdvashta Bandhanaha Astita Paramam Yogam Madeham Ubude Gatam. The Dichimuni controlled these senses, life force, mind, and intelligence, and became absorbed in trance. Thus, he cut all his material bonds. He could not perceive how this material body became separated from his self. So we are hearing the perfection of yoga in the synonyms. The Sanskrit of absorption is yogam, or trance. And the benefit, the primary benefit of this trance or absorption is separation from material bondage. Now, absorption is actually required in any activity to achieve any result from any kind of karma or activity using the senses to create, to render some kind of result, create some kind of effect. Absorption is required. So, what material absorption gets you is a round trip around the universe. So, if you're educated in the science of karma, good karma, then the objective of one's absorption is some demigod. So, the object of your worship is some demigod, some other powerful being, some powerful jiva. In Kali Yuga, the object of worship is multinational corporations because they provide the paycheck. Politicians also, have become, because they lack power, they are Shudras, they don't have their own treasury, um, they don't have their own military. Because when you look at how the world was structured from an administrative point of view 5,000 years ago, um, even though you had the Kuru Empire, the Kuru dynasty, which was the most powerful military force, but each kingdom was actually managed um, independently. So it's not that the Kurus would meddle in the day-to-day affairs of um, the kingdoms, other kingdoms. Uh, but it's just that they were the most powerful military force. And so, based on that, so it was a constant, the way Hridayanand Maharaj describes it, he describes it as constitutional monarchy. Um, and so each kingdom had its own military, each kingdom would manage its own affairs. And each kingdom was led by a Kshatriya. So, in order for you to rise to power, you needed your own military, treasury, minister. So, to be a politician 5,000 years ago, you needed power. And, and therefore, And these Kshatriyas, because they were educated in the science of elevation, how to actually advance your consciousness, their primary objective is to die. And either you win on the battle and you gain material possessions and expand, your empire and your dominion over different lands, or if you die in battle, you gain the celestial heavenly planets. So this was mentioned in the introduction to this chapter that we're reading. But in doing so, you would always give to the brahmanas, make sure that everybody was following their duties that they say they. So if somebody declares, I am a brahmana, or I am a kshatriya, or I am a vaishya, then you have to actually do those duties. And the ultimate recipient of the activities that these orders would perform, ultimate recipient is Lord Vishnu himself. So gradually one would actually become purified. And even though the incentive for performing these activities in the immediate sense was for elevation to higher destinations, but the activities was actually purifying the desire for sense gratification. And so gradually, just for doing dharma, perform one's own duty just for the sake of duty. Why? Because these duties sustain. So dharma means activities which actually sustain. So by performing one's prescribed duties, then they are actually um, acting according to the will of Vishnu himself, who is the maintainer of all living entities. Vishnu or Narayan, the shelter of all living entities. He has a system how the shelter is reticulated throughout human society. It's through the system of an ashram. So when you participate in it, you get benefits. So either you get material benefits now if you live as a politician, as a kshatriya, or if you die in the battle, you get elevation. And so at the end of this chapter, this is what Vritrasura will be encouraging. Um, the demons, they're going to run away during the battle, and he's going to be left facing um, Indra all by himself. And you'll see in his description of why you need to actually never leave the battle, just continue fighting. There's different incentives for why it's actually one should actually stay. Just as Krishna, he's convincing Arjuna throughout the whole Bhagavad Gita why it's best for him to stay from a karma yoga point of view, from a jnana yoga point of view, and ultimately from a bhakti yoga point of view. So this is Vritrasura's perfection, that one should actually stay and fight. Excuse me. So in this particular chapter, um, so whatever activity that whatever result that we're trying to get, um, yoga is required, absorption is required. And that absorption is underpinned by desire. So in this particular case, in Tadichi's case, um, this desire was underpinned by his surrender to the will of Lord Vishnu himself. So Lord Vishnu wanted, um, he knew that, yes, the Lord Vishnu has sent these demigods to come and request my bones. And so I should give it up in charity. And so just to hear good instructions, he refused. But the good instruction that was being spoken is that, and as Prabhupada was mentioning in the purports, is that, well, your body is going to be eaten anyway by dogs, jackals, different worms, maggots. It's going to go into the oblivion of the cycle of birth and death, going to be digested by some living entity. So while you have it, uh, do something of benefit. While it's actually functioning and is bound and covering the soul, do something of value so that you can actually leverage or gain a profit, leverage its full utility, and that is elevation to higher destinations. Now, in this elevation to higher destinations, you don't want it to become a round trip. And what makes it a round trip is desire. So when you get elevated, it's the elevation is more detachment from matter, gradual detachment from matter. And you do this through cultivation of knowledge. So if you look at um, the, the the system of empiric philosophy, neti neti, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, and you go through all the 23 elements that are covering the body, the knowledge acquiring senses, the karma indriya, the executive senses, the jnana indriyas, and the karma indriyas. And then you go to what is integrating all that information and causing action is the mind itself, uh, and then the intelligence. These are actually chains. That's really what it is. It's actually chains. It's a field of bondage. Now, you may know that, actually, not you may know, everybody knows, those who've read, who are familiar, who've been practicing Krishna consciousness, read Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. That Prabhupada immediately, when the US government had claimed that they had put a man on the moon during the Apollo missions, they had landed on the moon. Immediately, he said it's bogus. They couldn't have done it. And uh, 30, yeah, 50 years later, more information has come out. Initially, you know, initially, I guess, yeah, early 90s, early 2000s, those who said the moon landings didn't occur, they were seen to be pushing a conspiracy theory. Now there's actually a lot of evidence, basically, to support what Prabhupada and others were saying that, yes, this was all staged. So there's um, political evidence and there's also physical evidence. So I'm going to talk about the physical evidence. Um, so some of you may not know there's a radiation field around the Earth. So it's discovered by a physicist by the name of uh, in 1958, James Van Allen. So they naturally named it after him, although several, I'm sure in a previous age, some other scientists, empiric philosopher knew about it and it was called after him. But anyway, that's politics for another day. So in this current age, it's called the Van Allen radiation belt. So this is a radiation field that's surrounding the Earth. So let's hear, just gonna read a physical description of it. The belt, the belts are in the Earth's two main belts extend from an altitude of about 640 to 58,000 kilometers, or 400 to 36,000 miles above the surface, in which radiation levels vary. The belts are in the inner region of Earth's magnetic field. They trap energetic Electrons and protons. Other nuclei, such as alpha particles, are less prevalent. Most of the particles that form the belts are thought to come from the solar wind, while others arrive as cosmic rays. By trapping the solar wind, the magnetic field deflects those energetic particles and protects the atmosphere from destruction. The belts endanger satellites, which must have their sensitive components protected with adequate shielding if they spend significant time near the zone. And then this is where it's very controversial. Apollo astronauts going through the Van Allen belts received a very low and harmless dose of radiation. So this is where it's contradictory because on NASA's website, there's a video where NASA is saying that we are yet to develop the technology for sending a man, a manned space mission through the Van Allen belts because the radiation will actually kill the person. So if we look at it, this radiation field that's around the Earth, that's trapping all these, it's basically creating a stable atmosphere, stable structure. So it's Earth's gravity that's also part of it. It's creating, yeah, it's trapping everything. And when you look at it, um, basically what causes the material elements, carbon, the earth fire, water, ether, the mind, the intelligence, what causes it to actually form this atmosphere around the soul? And that is desire. So Krishna, he says that one is actually creating the next birth. So um, and this is also in detail described by Panditi Prabhu in his Atma Paradigm seminar or series. Basically, how the subtle body becomes a template. Uh, and he's quoting a lot of temporary evidence, contemporary evidence, but it's all the entire framework is described by Akiladev in the third canto. So it's desire that is actually trapping these elements and creating this quote unquote radiation field around the soul, and it's keeping the soul bound. Krishna, he describes it qualitatively in Bhagavad Gita, Icha Dvesha Samuttena Dvandva Mohena Bharata. Sarva Bhutani Sammoham Sarge Yanti Parantapa. O sign of Bharata, O conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, bewildered by dualities arisen from desire and hate. So we've described, Rama is describing it this way, Krishna is describing it this way, uh, all the Mahajans are describing how these elements get bound around the soul, how the soul gets entrapped around these elements. And they keep the soul from, keep them bound. They can't actually move. So that's why uh, going, going to the heavenly planets, going to other planets as well. This earth, it's a prison. It's an actual prison. So that's really what this Van Allen radiation field is proof of, is that we can't just willy-nilly go to other planets. Yes, we can want to desire that way, but for the last 60 years, the technology actually hasn't been developed. Um, so the political claim when the moon landings were done was that we did it during the Apollo missions, and then in a fire, all the designs they got lost, and now since then we haven't been able to create the technology again, which again it's bogus. So this is yes, so this is why it's still a relevant mission. So if putting a man on the moon is man's highest um, accomplishment in technological advancement, then for the spirit soul, becoming free from desire and hate, becoming free from the uh, having your senses under control, having your life force under control, and being absorbed in trance to the point where you can't even perceive, as the Dichimuni can perceive, that his material body has become separate from him. In other words, the consummate out of body experience. This is actually the highest achievement. It's relevant now, it was relevant 60 years ago, 1,000 years ago. This is the highest achievement in existence for the jiva. How to actually, it's the highest spiritual and material technological advancement for actually becoming free from these elements. Mm. So that's why Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, um, from where they begin, Bhagavad Gita, you're not this body, and then where they're taking you, how to actually become free from this body. It's an endeavor that will always be relevant throughout the entire life cycle of the universe. So we're talking 311 trillion, 40 billion years. It'll always be relevant. So you should never feel, in your day to day, what you're trying for, um, you're becoming irrelevant in society. No, they are still trying. Till to this day, they're still trying to create the technology for how to push a man or a woman astronaut through the Van Allen radiation field. They're still trying, and they still can't do it. That's why they're sending mannequins and rovers, etc. They're not sending people; they're sending robots, which can't go through it. So for us, we should see that yes, this yogam, this absorption, this trance, the highest form of trance is actually to be absorbed in the lotus feet of Krishna. So, so Krishna, he says, whoever at the time of death quits his body remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this, there's no doubt. So when you have the opportunity to come and take darshan of Radha Damodar, see Damodar's lotus feet, see how his form is bent, and you feel an attraction. You actually feel a spontaneous attraction towards those feet. You should know you are making technological advancement. Yes, because this specific attraction, when you're looking, at his calf, you're looking at how his form is bent, you're looking at his toenails, you're looking at his heel, and you're feeling attraction, like genuinely, you should know you are the one of the highest technologists, innovate. Well, yeah, highest technology, yeah, spiritual technologists in existence. You should know it's very, very advanced to actually feel spontaneous attraction for the Lord's form, because this specific attraction, this is what is actually going to propel you out of the your bondage, the radiation field, quote unquote, of the 23 elements that are surrounding you. And then Krishna, and then now the statement that why the Bhakti yoga system is the best is that you don't mechanically get to the stage of trance, or sequentially, right? Like first you gain control over the senses, asana, then you gain control over the life force, perfection of pranayama, then you gain control over the mind, pratyahara, you just withdraw everything, all the karmendriya and the gyanendriyas, and the mind just becomes really still. And then you gain control over the intelligence, dharana, which is you are firmly focused. You're bringing everything into focus. Um, and that's your determination. This is the perfection of control of the intelligence. And then dhyana happens. Then you become absorbed in meditation on the form of the supersoul. Um, so the Ashtanga yoga system and other yoga systems, they get you to this point sequentially, to the point of samadhi sequentially. But bhakti yoga is so advanced that you experience glimpses of samadhi, even though you are still attached to the body, even though you haven't perfected asana, you don't have full control over the senses, you still get glimpses of samadhi. How is that possible? It's achieved through the great mantra for delivering the mind. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So when you're chanting, and I don't know, it probably has happened to most of you, if you're really absorbed, you actually experience an out of body experience. Um, and the quality is different. It might not be like, well, sometimes it could happen where, you jump out of your body, you can just hear the mantra and you can see yourself chanting. That could also happen. But generally speaking, is the standard one is that you're just chanting, you can just perceive yourself producing the sound, and you can perceive the sound vibration entering your ear. And that's all that you're thinking about, that flow of transcendental energy uh, from the mouth into the ear. And yeah, when I'm really listening, I can even sometimes like the my japamala feels like I'm holding golf balls, like really big, bigger than usual, because everything is just becoming like, well, okay, it seems like I'm perceiving my size relative to the body is that I'm extremely tiny. Krishna, it's described that one is uh, 10,000 part of the tip of a human hair. Very, very tiny. So you can actually experience this. Yeah. And then obviously, the absorption breaks and then you go about your service and the mind is then mixed in with other desires that you've brought into devotional service, etc. But this is the specific advantage uh, of bhakti yoga. Of all yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshipping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. So the samadhi of the bhakti yogi, uh, they experience it as long as you just keep practicing devotional service, you experience these periods of samadhi and they actually extend longer and longer. Um, periods of the day, longer periods of the day as you're becoming more experienced. And then days, they get longer. And then your whole life is just samadhi. Your whole life is just samadhi. And Prabhupada demonstrated the perfection of the highest of all yogis, Prabhupada. This perfection where the whole life was just samadhi. And when he was unfolding the Sankirtan movement in the West, you know, Tarka Prabhu has told us that practically speaking, Prabhupada wasn't sleeping. Practically speaking, he was not sleeping for 10, 11 years, even though uh, his physical body was so advanced in age, where most of his peers and persons who are that age group you sleep more because because the body is deteriorating, and so you don't produce as much energy as before. The digestive powers become slackened. It's not as intense, and so the senses, the karmendriya and the gyanendriyas are slack, and so you need more sleep, um, for energy. But Prabhupada practically was not sleeping, and when we are reading in the Lilamrita, the final lesson, Satsvarup Maharaj actually describes that this samadhi is just as Dadichi Mundi demonstrated that he could not perceive the separation of his body, uh, of his physical body from the soul, because he was really absorbed in love and affection for wanting to please Narayan, wanting to please Lord Vishnu, because he was a devotee. That the Lord asked me to give up this body, so I'm going to do it. Similarly, even Prabhupada was always absorbed in what does actually Krishna want. So I'm reading here from the final lesson. Despite his promise to live, Srila Prabhupada said his life was still in Krishna's hands. Everything was. His free choice did not mean he was absolutely independent. Rather, the pure devotee's attitude is to freely surrender to Krishna, whatever happens. In the mood of the gopis, the foremost devotees of Lord Krishna, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu prayed, "You may handle me roughly in your embrace, or make me broken-hearted by not being present before me, but you are always my worshipable Lord unconditionally." Because the exchanges between the Lord and his pure devotees are always supremely personal, both the Lord and his devotees express desires and individual will. In his childhood Leela, Krishna sometimes breaks Mother Yashoda's butter pot, and sometimes he allows her to catch him and bind him. In any case, the will of the Lord and the will of the devotee are always one in interest, but they are sometimes expressed in the form of a loving conflict. Similarly, although Srila Prabhupada had promised his devotees that he would stay in the world and defy death, he still remained surrendered to the will of Krishna. Srila Prabhupada had already expressed his surrender in the prayer he had given his disciples to offer on his behalf. My dear Lord Krishna, if you desire, please cure Srila Prabhupada. By the phrase, if you desire, he was reminding his followers of the supreme prerogative of Krishna and was asking them to abide by it, although he was also giving them an acceptable way to petition Krishna. In a similar case in 1967, he had given his disciples another prayer. My master has not finished his work. He had said then that Krishna had responded to this prayer, granting the wishes of the devotees. Srila Prabhupada himself was responding to the devotees' prayers, and Krishna had given him the choice. But as a surrendered soul, Srila Prabhupada waited for further developments, ever sensitive to Krishna's desire. As Prabhupada had said, when invited by Kirtananda to come to his palace in New Vrindavan, let us see which palace I'm going to. As a loving tension can sometimes exist between the Supreme Lord and his pure devotee, so now a similar tension existed between Srila Prabhupada and his followers. Prior to his disciples' desperate petition at his bedside, Srila Prabhupada had seen his duty as instructing his disciples in how to die. Part of his mission was to set the perfect example in this most important lesson, how to pass life's ultimate test. But now, his disciples were asking him to postpone the lesson in dying and stay with them indefinitely in the preaching field. And Prabhupada had agreed, showing that he had the ability to live if he chose. But sooner or later, he would have to return to the lesson on how a person should face the end of life. Yes. So this is Prabhupada's examples that um, being sensitive to Krishna's desire. So when you are absorbed with great faith, right, uh, you are not bewildered by the dualities that arise from desire and hate. Right? This itcha, dvesha, some of things. So when you're sensitive to Krishna's desire, you're not absorbed in this. And this delusion is arising from the bondage, the quote unquote, the field, the radiation field that's around the soul. So it's born of absorption in the material mind. And uh, and it's trapping the soul. So if you are trying to perform yoga for your own um, sense gratification, then you fall down. So there's big yogis who are trying to stay absorbed in samadhi for their own sense gratification. Then they fall down. But the real secret to samadhi and maintaining samadhi is to be sensitive to the Supreme Lord's desire. So when you are sensitive, then you actually become the highest yogi of all, because then even you're acting with your senses, you're perceiving the world, you're interacting with materialistically motivated people in the world. Still, you're absorbed in trance. So this is what Krishna says about the highest yogi of all, is that they can, through his work of maintaining and giving them benefit, giving them the highest knowledge so that they can actually elevate themselves to the heavenly planets. To the back to the spiritual world, back home, back to God. So even though they're interacting with less advanced people who can cause them to fall down, um, but because they are sensitive to the will of the Lord and the desire, they stay absorbed. This is the secret. So yes, dear devotees, on this day, 23rd day of 2025, let us pray to Radha Damodar, uh, who help us increase our sensitivity to his will. And in this way, we will be preparing for the final lesson on how to die. And the great incentive is that you'll be the most advanced technologist in all your social circles. Whoever knows you, gives you respect or praise, this this is the highest achievement of the human form of life. How to actually become free of this radiation field of the body, how to not just go to any other material planets. So the president, the new president, he's declared that we're going to go to Mars. So we have a bigger desire, more ambitious one, is that actually to get out of this universe, go back home, back to Godhead. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions, reflections, or contentions?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yeah, I want to thank you for a nice and engaging class. Lots to think about there. Yeah, this moon landing. I remember as a young person at the time that these things were supposed to have happened. Many people assumed that there was no controversy at that time so much, except Srila Prabhupada and his followers. But apart from them, people generally were just all in awe and completely accepting this. And one of the conceptions that persisted for decades afterwards, even when some questions arose, was that um, surely it would have been impossible to stage such a thing because um, the the Russians would have been able to perceive what was going on. They would be able to detect the spacecraft and its trajectory and so on. But that's actually not true. The most powerful surveillance systems that we have, radar, have at the let's see, U.S. radar systems, most advanced military systems. The range is about little over 3,500 miles. It's The actual numbers are uh, classified, but that's the estimate. The Russians have some more powerful systems, estimated to have a range around 3,700 miles. But that's really nothing, right? That's like the United States is 3,000 miles across. So to be able to detect um, even a large um, craft at even part way towards the moon, it's completely out of range. There's no way to track such a thing. Anyway, it's just a thought that I had. But I was when I heard the last sentence of the purport here, Srila Prabhupada is saying that the Bhakti Yogi always thinks of Krishna, and therefore at the time of death he can very easily transfer himself to Krishna Loka without even perceiving the pains of death. And death is typically always going to be unpleasant in a host of ways. But for the devotee, his consciousness is fixed elsewhere, and he's not brought up in the affairs of his body, and not necessarily perceiving the discomfort. Um, there's another related statement in the story of the passing of Dhruva Maharaj. So the Vishnu Dutas have arrived. They've got this splendid Vaikuntha airplane, and it's described that I can't remember the exact wording, but it's described that Dhruva took the opportunity to step on the head of death in order to board the airplane. And this, I've contemplated these statements and others over the years. There is, and there are various descriptions in different places, but it's what is consistent is that the devotee does not have to experience the pain, the discomfort of death, but rather there is a phenomenon which actually trying to find the words to describe this. The experience of death becomes a catalyst for it propels you into transcendence. In some cases, the horror of death propels an individual. There is a desire to take shelter of what is permanent when everything that you have held on to is proving to be fallible and impermanent, and it's all being ripped away, and sometimes in ghastly, horrible ways, to see that which you are most attached to beyond everything else, your own body is being destroyed. Um, sometimes in horrible ways, in some terrible accident or something, it becomes, by Krishna's arrangement, a transcendental impetus to take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. You turn away from the horror of material existence and immediately take shelter of the safe and comfortable shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. Um, So, like everything else in Krishna consciousness for the devotee, the experience of the material is transformed. Everything becomes somehow Krishnaized. And what might be a horrible experience for a materialist becomes transcendently wonderful for the devotee. That's some of my thoughts, and we're up to 8 o'clock. So, um, thank you again, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna for don't feel restricted to continue to churn the nectar on the specific advantage that Bhakti Yoga gives on how to actually face life's ultimate test. You can turn it, I'll just audio. I'll just turn off the audio. Hare Krishna.